Picture the deep, vast expanse of the Arabian desert at midnight. The dunes stretch endlessly under a canopy of cold, brilliant stars, and the silence is so absolute it feels heavy, almost suffocating. You are a solitary traveler, navigating the shifting sands by the pale light of the moon. The wind begins to howl, carrying with it the fragrant, intoxicating scent of frankincense and myrrh from distant, forgotten valleys. But then, you notice something entirely unnatural in the sand ahead. Footprints. Yet, as you hold your lantern closer to the shifting earth, a profound sense of unease washes over you. These are not the tracks of a man, nor the hooves of a beast. It is a single, continuous line of footprints, spaced impossibly far apart, as if made by someone, or something, leaping with tremendous force on only one leg. The tracks vanish into the impenetrable gloom of the night. You hold your breath, listening. Over the whispering wind, you hear a strange, rhythmic thudding rapidly approaching, accompanied by a high-pitched, echoing vocalization that chills you to your very core. You are not alone in the empty quarter. You are being followed by an entity that defies the very laws of nature and biology, a creature caught suspended between the mortal realm and the supernatural veil. Welcome to the comprehensive exploration of one of the most structurally anomalous, conceptually profound, and utterly bewildering entities in all of global mythology. This is the legend of the Nasnas, a being fundamentally defined by its physical and existential lack. It is a creature that will force us to question the boundaries of humanity, the nature of divine retribution, and the profound psychological terror of facing something that is exactly half of a human being. To truly comprehend the sheer, uncanny horror of the Nasnas, we must first examine its impossible physiology. When we think of mythological beasts, our minds typically conjure images of chimera, creatures formed by combining the majestic and terrifying parts of various animals. We imagine the wings of an eagle, the head of a lion, or the tail of a serpent. The Nasnas, however, operates on a completely different principle of terror. It is not a combination of fearsome traits, but rather a terrifying subtraction. It is the horror of profound incompleteness. Edward William Lane, the esteemed 19th century translator of the monumental work, 1001 Nights, meticulously codified the appearance of this entity. According to his deeply researched translations, the Nasnas is perfectly bisected. It is described quite literally as half a human being, possessing only half of a head, half of a torso, a single arm, and a single leg. Try to visualize this form for a moment. Picture an invisible, vertical plane slicing perfectly down the center of a human figure, leaving only one side behind to navigate the harsh, unforgiving world. Despite lacking the bilateral symmetry that governs almost all complex life on Earth, the creature is not slow, nor is it clumsy. On the contrary, the folklore explicitly states that the Nasnas uses its single leg to hop across the desert sands with astonishing, almost supernatural agility. It leaps over dunes and navigates treacherous rocky ravines with a speed that easily overtakes a fleeing traveler. This physical contradiction, a completely broken, seemingly non-functional form that nonetheless moves with terrifying grace and speed, creates a profound sense of cognitive dissonance for anyone unfortunate enough to encounter it. How does a creature of such profound anatomical distress come to exist? To understand the origin of the Nasnas, we must delve deep into the complex taxonomy of the unseen world, specifically the intricate hierarchy of the Jinn. In the traditions of the Arabian Peninsula, the Jinn are entities woven from smokeless fire, existing in a parallel society to our own. But within this hidden world, there are lower, degraded castes. The Nasnas is universally believed to be the tragic offspring resulting from the union between a human being and a degraded class of Jinn known as the Shiqq. The Shiqq themselves are entities considered to be incredibly low in the supernatural hierarchy, and they are inherently defined by their own half-formed monstrous appearance. Originating in the ancient, pre-Islamic folklore of the Bedouin tribes, the Shiqq represented the ultimate imperfection in the spiritual world. When the demonic, incomplete lineage of the Shiqq intertwines with the fragile mortal essence of humanity, the result is the Nasnas. This hybrid genesis ensures that the creature inherits the absolute worst attributes of both lineages, It possesses the mortal vulnerability and partial consciousness of its human parent, inextricably bound to the supernatural deformity and atmospheric isolation of its Jinn ancestry. It is a creature born out of profound metaphysical error, forever trapped between two worlds and fully welcomed by neither. The mythology of the half-formed entity extends far beyond monstrous encounters in the wilderness. It is actually deeply interwoven into the historical and prophetic tapestries of pre-Islamic Arabia. The concept of the Shiqq is not relegated solely to wilderness spirits. In the annals of ancient history, there existed a legendary soothsayer who actually bore the name Shiqq, and his physical description mirrored the supernatural entity perfectly. This historical or pseudo-historical Shiqq was a highly revered seer who looked precisely like half a man, possessing only one eye, one hand, and one leg. Despite this severe physical limitation, his mind was deeply attuned to the mysteries of the unseen. He, along with another incredibly famous and physically anomalous soothsayer named Sati, held immense power in the ancient courts. Sati himself was a profound monstrosity, described as lacking a rigid internal frame, missing functioning limbs, and possessing a face that appeared sunken directly into his chest. These two remarkable anomalous figures were summoned by King Rabia bin Nasser, a powerful ruler of Yemen who had experienced a truly terrifying vision of the future. When the king's standard advisors failed to comprehend the vision, the half-formed Shiqq and the formless Sati were brought forth. They successfully interpreted the king's vision, predicting monumental geopolitical shifts, the eventual fall of empires, and the profound changes that would sweep across the Arabian Peninsula. The legend of these seers suggests a deep cultural belief that those who are physically fractured in the mortal realm are granted unparalleled, compensating vision into the spiritual realm. The Nasnas, therefore, carries the aesthetic echo of these ancient, powerful prophets, blending the line between a cursed monster and a tragic vessel of unseen truths. While the biological lore attributes the Nasnas to the union of human and Shiqq, there is another, deeply theological explanation for their existence, one rooted in the concept of divine punishment and eschatological history. In certain traditions and interpretations, the Nasnas is not a naturally born species, but rather the result of a terrifying divine transmutation, a process known as mask. Deep in the treacherous, shifting sands of the empty quarter lies the legendary lost city of Iram of the Pillars. This was a metropolis of unparalleled architectural majesty, built by a deeply arrogant society that ultimately rejected divine guidance. According to rich desert lore, when celestial wrath descended to ruin the city, the inhabitants were not simply wiped from the face of the earth. Instead, legends dictate that the strange Jinn-like Nasnas that roam the desolate ruins are actually the former, proud citizens of Iram. They were punished and eternally transformed into these half-beings as a monument to their own hubris. This theological dimension is further expanded in certain Shiite interpretations regarding the epochs before the creation of modern humanity. When ancient texts discuss the time before mankind, they speak of the earth being inhabited by both jinns and beings known as Nisanis. For 70,000 years, these entities roamed the globe, but they ultimately filled the world with profound injustice and terrible chaos. When the celestial veil was lifted, the heavens witnessed this ruinous behavior, prompting the divine decision to replace them with humanity. In this context, the Nasnas represents a failed, archaic prototype of existence, a living, breathing relic of an era of chaos that the current world was meant to leave behind. As the tales of the Nasnas spread through the caravans and trade routes of the ancient world, the creature's morphology began to adapt to different regional fears and geographical landscapes. While the classic image of the leaping half-man remained constant, travelers to the furthest edges of the known world reported bizarre, highly localized variations of the entity. In the dense, shadowy woods of Yemen and the Hadramaut region, local lore sometimes added functional appendages to the creature. To aid its incredible bounding locomotion, some versions of the Nasnas were described as possessing a tail resembling that of a sheep. When the mythos traveled across the vast oceans to the mysterious island of Riaj in the Sea of China, the creature took on an even more gothic, terrifying silhouette. In these remote maritime accounts, the Nasnas was said to sport leathery appendages resembling the wings of a bat protruding from its single shoulder. While these wings did not grant the power of true flight, they added a terrifying, demonic grandeur to its silhouette as it leapt through the misty island jungles. But perhaps the most perilous variation of this mythology is found just across the water, deeply embedded in Somali folklore. Here, we find a creature sharing the exact same half-formed lineage and characteristics, known locally as the Shunguruf or Hungruf. But while the Arabian Nasnas relies on its agility to stalk or flee, the Somalian Hungruf possesses a supernatural lethality that makes it an apex terror. Legends state that this entity can vanquish a traveler with a mere touch, causing their entire physical form to dissolve and fade away in mere seconds, leaving absolutely no earthly trace behind. It is a swift, absolute eraser of life, a grim reminder of the deadly environments from which these stories were born. We now arrive at the most bewildering, philosophically complex, and strangely tragic aspect of the entire Nasnas mythology. Up to this point, we have painted the picture of a monstrous entity, a predator of the sands, a cursed remnant of forgotten cities. One would expect the folklore to center around brave heroes striking down the beast. But in the historical accounts documented by medieval scholars, the narrative takes a shocking, deeply unsettling turn. In the regions of Yemen and Hadramaut, the Nasnas was not solely the hunter, it was the hunted. The medieval Persian scholar Zakaria al-Qazwini, in his monumental 13th century encyclopedia, The Marvels of Creation and Oddities of Existence, documented a truly bizarre ecological reality. According to his comprehensive accounts, the local people of Hadramaut actively tracked, captured, and consumed the Nasnas. The creature was treated as a rare, highly prized culinary delicacy. Its meat, according to these unsettling historical logs, was incredibly sweet, often compared to the tender meat of a young lamb that had grown fat by feeding on the rich resin of desert trees. This dietary practice introduces a profound existential paradox. The Nasnas was not a mindless grazing animal. According to the very same scholars who documented its consumption, the creature possessed profound intelligence. It was endowed with the gift of human speech. When surrounded by hunters and facing its inevitable end, the trapped Nasnas would weep. It would articulate its fear. It would desperately cry out for mercy, explicitly invoking the name of God to beg for its continued existence. And yet, despite its eloquence, despite its intelligence, and despite its desperate theological pleas, the hunters would ignore its cries and prepare it for the cooking fire. This dynamic completely subverts the traditional monster narrative. Who is the true monster in this scenario? The half-formed anomaly, simply trying to exist in the dunes, or the fully formed humans who casually rose to speaking, reasoning being that begs for mercy in their own language? This horrific culinary tradition even birthed a dark colloquial proverb in the region. According to historical anecdotes, while a Nasnas was being roasted over an open flame, the creature, still conscious and suffering, would cry out to its tormentors, "Turn it over, it burns on that side." This tragic, deeply macabre plea evolved into a common cultural proverb. "Turn me over and over, perhaps I may be useful to you," used to reproach someone who endlessly shifts things from place to place without reason. The creature's profound suffering was reduced to a dark joke, cementing its status as the ultimate tragic figure of Arabian myth. The compelling, tragic duality of the Nasnas ensured that it would not remain confined to the oral traditions of the Bedouin or the encyclopedias of medieval scholars. As literature flourished during the Islamic Golden Age, the creature found a permanent home in one of the most influential narrative collections in human history, the 1001 Nights. Within this sprawling magical text, the Nasnas serves as a potent symbol of dark magic and transformative ruin. In a specific narrative known as The Story of the Sage and the Scholar, we see the concept of the creature utilized as a weaponized curse. A character in the tale is forcibly transformed into a Nasnas when a malevolent magician applies cursed cola, traditional dark cosmetic, directly to one of his eyes. In a flash of dark magic, the victim is split, reduced to a hopping, half-formed entity, demonstrating how the myth shifted from a biological species to a horrific spell used to humiliate and deform one's enemies. As the centuries passed and these legendary tales were translated and brought to Western shores, the sheer strangeness of the Nasnas captured the imagination of European literary giants. The highly acclaimed French novelist Gustave Flaubert explicitly wove the creature into his complex philosophical drama, The Temptation of Saint Anthony. In Flaubert's vision, the Nasnas appears among a chaotic, swirling parade of grotesque, bizarre entities designed to test the saint's faith and sanity, proving that the psychological impact of the half-man transcends cultural boundaries and resonates deeply with the universal human fear of existential distortion. In the modern era, the Nasnas did not fade into the sands of obscurity. Instead, it experienced a massive resurgence, transforming once again to fit the intricate tactical worlds of modern tabletop role-playing games. When the creators of advanced Dungeons & Dragons sought to craft their immersive Arabian Nights-inspired campaign setting known as Al-Qadam, they turned to the ancient medieval bestiaries, bringing the Nasnas into the mathematical realm of dice and character sheets to fit the rigorous demands of a combat-focused game. The deeply tragic and sympathetic elements of the folklore were systematically stripped away. In these modern rulebooks, the Nasnas is no longer the natural offspring of the Shiqq, nor is it a tragic victim of desert hunters. Instead, they were reimagined as artificial, fanatical constructs. They are detailed as the dark creations of evil priests and wizards, manufactured solely to serve as vigilant, unrelenting guardians to secure hidden strongholds. Their aesthetic was updated for maximum intimidation. They are described as having a grayish, corpse-like tint to their skin, and their single, unblinking eye glints with a terrifying, evil insanity. The philosophical paradox of a creature that speaks eloquently and begs for its life was entirely erased. In the tabletop universe, the mechanics dictate that because they are missing half of their vocal cords, they can never speak. They are only capable of uttering a strange, high-pitched, echoing hooting noise. But this silence does not make them weak. The game designers weaponize their terrifying ambiance. In the heat of an encounter, the horrific volume and tone of the Nasnas' hooting scream can cause a chilling, magical fear to wash over anyone within a 10-foot radius, leaving brave adventurers completely paralyzed with terror for several agonizing moments. Furthermore, despite lacking half their body, they are granted extraordinary, supernatural strength in their single arm, wielding massive scimitars or battle axes with devastating precision. Because of their dark, magical origins, they shrug off normal steel, requiring enchanted or pure iron weaponry to be defeated. Through this modern lens, the tragic, edible anomaly of the medieval scholars was successfully resurrected as a pure, unadulterated nightmare of the gaming table. As we draw our journey to a close, we must reflect on what the Nasnas truly represents. It is a mirror held up to the human psyche, reflecting our deepest, most primal anxieties. We are creatures that inherently crave wholeness, symmetry, and completion. When we are confronted with something that is fundamentally, structurally incomplete, it bypasses our logical mind and strikes directly at our core fears of fragility and physical ruin. The lore of the Nasnas is a masterclass in the evolution of mythology. It began as a whisper on the desert wind, an explanation for strange tracks in the sand and the eerie sounds of the deep night. It became intertwined with the grand tapestry of divine punishment, serving as a hopping, tragic monument to the ruined, arrogant city of Iram. It challenged the ethical boundaries of medieval scholars, who documented the profound horror of humanity consuming a sentient, speaking being that shared half of our own nature. It traveled across oceans to take on batwings in the China Sea, and it evolved into an instantaneous force of ruin in the folklore of Somalia. It found eternal life in the pages of classic literature, and it was ultimately forged into a terrifying, scimitar-wielding sentinel in the imaginations of modern gamers. And the Nasnas endures because it is the ultimate outsider. It is the monster that is too human to be a beast, yet too monstrous to be granted the compassion reserved for mankind. So, the next time you find yourself in a quiet, desolate place, and you hear the howling of the wind, look closely at the ground before you. If you see a single line of footprints stretching into the dark, and you hear the high-pitched, melancholic cry echoing from the shadows, step carefully. You are walking in the presence of the half-formed, a creature that has been leaping across the margins of human history for 1,000 years, forever searching for the missing piece of its own soul.